Hey, welcome. Welcome to Hired How to Get the Jobs weekly update. Over the next 30 minutes, we are going to be talking about the current job market, some initiatives Microsoft is doing to help bridge the skills gap between the jobs of the future and the skills of today, as well as talking a little bit about what jobs are poised to come roaring back. Then we're going to be talking about the skills that most employers are looking for right now during this pandemic, as hiring does happen slowly but surely. Businesses still need to operate. And then, of course, we're going to get into a topic of discussion. And this week it's going to be, how do you answer the question before it's asked in the hiring process? Really, how do you figure out what questions you need to answer? Because guess what? If they don't ask you, you might never get a chance to answer them. And that might just be the difference of getting the job and not. And then, as always, 15 minutes in for this 30-minute show, we're going to talk and take your questions. So if you have any questions, make sure you queue them up. Feel free to type them in now, and I'll get to them when I get to that segment. But you can also be sure that I already have some from this week. So if you don't want to type your question in or whatever, no worries. I already have questions from clients throughout this week. So first of all, let's talk a little bit. Well, actually, let me tell you again who I am. My name is Tony Martin. I write a blog called howtogetthejob.blog, so check out all that content there. Again, I had this ticker up here earlier, but subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you like this content, share it with other people. Look at Facebook, follow me on Instagram. Bottom line, I try to do different things in different platforms. The Instagram for the past 2 weeks has all been emotional intelligence tips and tricks and questions. So if you are interviewing people or being interviewed, and you struggle with some of these questions and you don't know why they're asking you some of those questions, you should be subscribing to my Instagram, because I tell you what questions are being asked and what the purpose is behind those questions, so that way you can practice those answers and you understand what the purpose of it is. So let's first, though, get to the current job market. Now, Microsoft had a very interesting article. It's an interactive article, and there's some interactive graphs here. So let me first show you what this is, and let me make it bigger for everybody. So you can see here that this is the U.S. labor unemployment market, powered by Federal Reserve Economic Database. And they mark key indicators in our economy. The Great Depression, we were at what, 25% unemployment, or 24.9%, and then we come on through to our present day. We had the Great Recession, and truthfully, this number here of 16.1%, it seems to be the May number. I believe the April number was somewhere about 19%, so we don't know quite what June is. And this article just came out this past Tuesday, but just remember, unemployment numbers are not simply tabulated by the amount of unemployment claims that are coming in. If you don't remember or haven't seen it, 2 weeks ago, I actually did about a 5-minute overview of how unemployment numbers are tabulated. And believe it or not, the majority of the ways they're tabulated is through surveys. They call 60,000 households every single month, and they roll off 15,000 households every month, and they roll new ones on. But it's a survey, and they've gotten, they believe, within less than 0.1% of accuracy next to the U.S. Census, which is actually much more comprehensive. But just so you kind of know how they're coming up with that. But looks like the current state of the market is still what it is, right? There's states still closing, there's states ratcheting back restrictions or ratcheting up restrictions. But this article that Microsoft did, which is on the Facebook page, is really interesting. It talks about demographics, which types of backgrounds of people and classes of people are most affected by this, and how they've been affected since December of 19 to present, and where the unemployment numbers have gone. The other piece I want to show you guys is what jobs are going to be coming back and roaring back. So let me come back with this one now. So this is the jobs. Let me take rid of this so we can see it. These are the jobs that are supposed to be coming roaring back, okay? Now, what's encouraging about this is we can see that it's currently we have 41 million jobs. By next year, 51 million. So we're hoping to grow 10 million jobs in 2021, another 15,000 million jobs on top of that in 2022, 24 million jobs growing on top of that. So hopefully within 5 years, we're 149 million more jobs grown. Now, I know you might be thinking, hey, I'm not a software person. I'm not an IT person. Does this really matter? And does this really help me? And yes, it does help you. And let me tell you why. These companies need salespeople. These companies need accountants. These companies need people to process paperwork and HR and personnel and hire. And these companies have all these different purposes, and they have all these functions inside of it. Yes, this is where the technology is growing and this is where the market's going to be, but there's going to be opportunities inside these for secondary jobs. I'd like to focus a little bit here on this cloud and data role. This is a really interesting area because I actually have a client that I was working with on the corporate side, helping her as she's hiring for corporate culture. I was helping her because they still plan on growing their team this year in a pandemic. And what they do is they digitize information from municipalities and they put it in the cloud. This makes them much better at collecting tax revenue and things like that. So it's not that exciting or happy, but truthfully, that's a great example of a business that's growing, that services a region and is only going to continue to expand. When I was doing executive recruiting and I was strong in that, AI was always being talked about in 2019 and late 2018. That's not going anywhere. AI, artificial intelligence technology, is going to make us better at our jobs. And that is certainly as well going to be something that we have to continue to look at. Cybersecurity, privacy, trust. So here's something as well. As, they talk about this in the bottom too. Food production is going to have another 324,000 jobs, 2 million jobs in healthcare, 6 million in the automotive industry. So again, this isn't just related to the internet technology space, but it will be related to other fields. Now, one thing I wanted to let you know, what part of this article is, Microsoft and LinkedIn have partnered up, and as we all know, LinkedIn is huge. I'm looking at some stats in that right now. They have 690 million users, professionals. They have 50 million companies that they work with, 11 million job listings. They have 36,000 individual defined skills. So imagine a job description with 36,000 skills needed, but through their 11 million jobs, they've broken that down to 36,000 skills needed, and they're partnered with 90,000 schools. So let me just say, LinkedIn has a lot of information available at their fingertips. So what they do is they're aggregating this information. They're figuring out, okay, where is the job force going to need to be 5 years from now? What are those skills that we need to do? And they've partnered now with Microsoft. And what Microsoft and LinkedIn have both determined is, look, there's a lot of gap here between the current skills today and what's going to be demanding in the future. So 2 days ago, on June 30th, 2020, Microsoft created or announced they're creating a program with the goal of training 25 million people across the globe on these skills. So take a look at the article. It talks about how to apply. These aren't Microsoft employees. These are everybody. And they have three purposes of this program. One, to define the skills that are needed for the future. Two, help give free access and learning paths to help individuals obtain these skills. And then the third part is connect those skills from those new people to opportunities that need those skills. So Microsoft is really interestingly doing something that can benefit a lot of organizations, not just them moving forward, because companies like Microsoft, they don't really probably have too big of a problem recruiting because they're so well known. But these smaller startups, these AI, these these private equity companies, they have a difficult time recruiting. Microsoft is doing something to help those organizations because they're going to be training their workforce. Because one part of this article discussed too, over the past 10 years, on-the-job training and corporate training has dramatically declined. So Microsoft found a gap there and they're trying to do something good, and I figured it was worth talking about. So next, let's talk a little bit about skills currently in high demand. If you don't follow this guy, I think you should. You don't need to, because I guess I'm talking about him all the time. But he comes out with an article a week, and this article is actually a few weeks old. I just wasn't able to get to it a few weeks ago. And it's talking about the skills most employers are looking for currently during this pandemic. And if you know anything about what I've been talking about recently, it's been a lot about emotional intelligence traits. Just like I said, I'm doing it on Instagram, and it won't stop with this article. This article is talking about the skills employers are looking for, and there's two main skills: flexibility and adaptability. That's one. And if you don't know why, I mean, let's be honest, we're in a market right now where everything is always changing. You're working from home today, now tomorrow you're not working from home. And then all of a sudden we have to be able to do more with less because we got to cut some budgets, and we have to do this. So now you have to all of a sudden to be able to adapt to being a hybrid of your old job, or unfortunately one of your counterparts gets laid off and now you got to absorb their job duties, and you have to be able to do that. And you've got to stretch yourself extra thin so companies can survive right now. Well, this is very true. And that's why employers are looking for one of these skills. The other skill is problem solving. according to Andrew Seaman from hashtag Get Hired on LinkedIn. Because the same exact thing. Today's problems didn't exist 6 months ago. And I'm guessing the problems of next week and next month are also probably going to be fairly new. In general, problems are pretty recyclable and they're pretty interchangeable, right? Whether you're doing offshore oil and gas, or you're doing aerospace, or you're flying, you're aviation, or you're building cars, or whatever, CEOs and executive teams have problems, and they can relate to those problems because they're all sharing the same problems. They're implementing a new ERP. Doesn't matter what organization or what team, they need this, they need that. People are always a problem. So with that, problem solving is going to always be a skill, but especially right now because the problems of today look so different than the problems of 6 months ago. And when you are trying to manage a large workforce and trying to keep people safe, it is really imperative that you hire people that aren't going to be problem children. They're going to be problem solvers. So make sure that when you're interviewing and asking you questions like, give me a time that you had to sacrifice quality for speed. That's a flexibility problem or question, and it's also a problem-solving question. So realize that when you get emotional intelligence trait questions like that, or tell me about a time you had to make a really difficult decision, tell me about a time you had to balance 2 priorities with 2 different supervisors. How'd you make that? How'd you do that? These are all around problem-solving and or flexibility. And when you hear those questions, that's what they're getting at. And right now, it seems like there's going to be a lot more questions in that arena. Okay. So next, let's talk a little bit about how do you answer the question that was never asked, and why is it so critical? Now, this has come up a lot for me in the past few weeks when I've been doing different coachings and trainings. And first of all, it starts in the application process. Okay. So when you apply to a job, you first look at the job description, you have your resume, and you put them over and you look at each other, and you should see potentially some red flags and some gaps there. Now, in 2016 and 2017, when I was really more on the corporate recruiting side, had a recruiting team working with me, it was not uncommon to get 300 or 400 job candidates or applicants per requisition. Today, I know it's well over 1,000. Okay, so you need to be sure that you are answering, that you are understanding what the job is, because here's what the process looks like. I'm a recruiter. I am trying to fill this vacancy today. I have a list of scripted questions that are going to be all part of my first phone call. So I'm going to call maybe 15, 20 people today, or 10 people out of my qualified people. And I'm going to look at these resumes, and I have 10 questions I want to ask. And they're going to be all around requirements. Do you have 10 years of experience or 5 years of experience? The job requires 10. Do you have you used SAP before? Tell me about your experiences and how they align to the requirements of this job. Do you have a college degree? Those are the first phone screening questions, okay? So your resume needs to make sure that as you're looking at those requirements in the job description, you hit them all. Because if you don't hit them all, you're not going to get a phone call. Because me as a phone screener, I'm going to be torn between a resume that has 9 out of the 10 things that I need and the ones that are 10 out of 10. And in this market, there are plenty of resumes that have 10 out of the 10 requirements. So if you are someone who has 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, or perhaps you have all 10, but there's something that's a red flag, meaning the job's in Houston and you live in Oklahoma. Well, you need to address that, because nobody is going to call you in Oklahoma today for the job that's in Houston, because there are plenty of local Houstonians who have the skills for that job. Maybe 3 months or 6 months ago, you'd get a phone call and they'd ask you, are you willing to relocate? But today you have to answer that question in the application, in your cover letter, in the tell me about yourself spot of the application, whatever. You have to say, hey, as you look at my resume, you'll see I live in Oklahoma. However, I am planning on moving to Houston this fall, or something like that. Even if it's not true 100%, because maybe you're planning, if you get a job, to move. But you need to make sure that when you are answering the application, you are anticipating the questions you would have if you were hiring somebody to do the job that you're trying to get. So then you go into the hiring process. Now you're interviewed, okay? And again, same thing pops up. You might have a situation where you are, and I've worked a lot recently too with people who are, we'll say in their mid-50s, which frankly isn't old. I'm 40 now. 55 is not old, but there's a stigma with people who are 55 who think they're old. The question you will get though is, or how much longer do you want to work? That's a natural question, because I want to know, as I'm building my team, are you building with my team, or are you just kind of coming around for 5 years and then going to leave? So, but again, if I have to ask you that question during the interview process, I don't know if the answer you give me is genuine or you're responding to my question. It gives a much better impact if you answer the question before it's asked. You evaluate your application and you get ready to go into an interview and you say, okay, if I was hiring me to get this job, I'd be concerned about my date gap here. I'd be concerned about my age. I'd be concerned about something else. So when they ask you that first question, tell me about yourself, I am answering all of those red flags that I would self-assess on me prior to any question they ask me. I would say, well, hey, I wouldn't say I'm 55, but hey, you know, I'm a really experienced individual, and I'm looking for a job for the next 10 years because I have 2 younger kids and I want to see them through college. And as you look at my resume, you might notice I have a couple of different job gaps since I got out of being a firefighter. That was a true story this week. And I specifically, over the last 10 years, have had 6 different jobs, and here's why. And you quickly tell them, well, I strategically got hired by each one of these companies so I can have a broader base of experience around the discipline of safety. And the only way I could do that, though, when I knew that I was going into a new career 20 years after being a firefighter, was to talk to the company who was hiring me and say, hey, I kind of want to do this and this. Is that possible? And I partnered with every single one of those companies in order to make sure that I get this broad range of experience, because now I'm ready with 10 years of eclectic experience where I think I'm a perfect fit for what you're looking for. And I'm hoping that I can spend the next 10 years of my career with your company. Again, they never asked me the question, how long do you want to work here? But I guarantee they're thinking about it. They never asked me, why is there a job hopping situation? But they probably were. And now by you volunteering the information in advance of the question coming, it gives me a lot more confidence into what you're actually, the truthfulness behind your answers. So that is that. Now let's get to your questions. Again, if you have any questions, feel free. Type them in the comments. I will push those to the front of the queue. But I did every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, I do the same broadcast, or very similar, different questions often, on LinkedIn. And I got a lot of questions yesterday from LinkedIn. So let me kind of start with those, because I think some of them are really relevant. I've heard you say less is more on resumes. Can you explain when this is true and why? Now, this is a really good question, because truthfully, I have clients right now, and if you're watching one of my clients, I will say that people who are professionals in communication, professionals in PR, are often guilty of this. And what this is using too many words to describe something. Listen, if you start listing out, like for example, it's really important maybe to say some key clients that you've had, because companies you're going to be applying to want to make sure that you've had customers in their customer base. So if you say, hey, I've worked for Exxon, Shell, and BP, and I can't think of another one, Chevron, that's great to mention some of those majors in there. But if you list a long list, Saudi Aramco, Petrobras, Petronas, I am naturally going to assume if the name isn't there, you haven't worked with them. So by you putting more information, you've now actually made me less likely to interview you, unless the companies that you've put in there are actually the ones that we have clients with, or we want to get into. So you need to be sure that you're not putting too much information, because it almost means that whatever you've left out was deliberate. I would much rather you say, I've had a lot of key clients in the oil major companies. Some of them include, but are not limited to, and then list 2 or 3. I would much rather that than for you to list all 7, because then whatever you've omitted, I'm assuming was intentional and you haven't worked with them. And maybe we're going to be working in the Middle East here, and I need to make sure you work with Saudi Aramco, but you left that one off because you didn't think it was relevant because the job was in Houston, and now you've eliminated yourself from contention. Another thing is sometimes people would like to really get into depth with their resume when they start talking about their their reasons for moving around. Maybe the company merged with another company and they really want to on the next role. They never left the company. They went from being maybe a director to then being a global director. And the transition happened during the merger, but it's not so clear. And I've seen it where clients have wanted to, well, let me explain the merger. You don't have to. You just have to explain you were promoted. Show me a new title, show me that. You can talk about maybe a skill that you learned because of the merger in the new role, but you don't need to give so much information that you don't leave anything for dessert. It's like, remember, the resume bullets are supposed to lead you to really impactful, impressive stories. They're not supposed to limit you on what you can say or hold you back. And if you put everything on your resume, no one's going to read it because your resume is going to be 10 pages long. And even though every bullet might be impressive, I'm not going to read it as a recruiter. So by putting more information, you've made yourself less scannable. That's the word I like to use. I'm not scanning your resume. I'm overwhelmed by your resume, and I might just glaze over it. Or worst case scenario, I'm only scanning your resume. I'm going to look at 25% of your bullets. And because you've written so much, there's only there's probably, and maybe only 10% of your bullets are really, really impressive. So now you've made 10% of your bullets impressive, and I'm only going to scan 25 of your bullets. So I have a 1 in 4 times a 1 in 10 chance. It's a 1 out of 40 chance of actually, I think it's 1 out of 40, maybe it's 1 out of 20. I'm not quite sure. Math geniuses, feel free to correct me. But you've given me a less likely opportunity of actually landing on something that's relevant and impressive. So make sure that what you're writing is relevant, impressive, make sure it's focused, and don't feel like you have to give away everything in your resume, because I will intentionally think that you're omitting stuff because you don't have it versus you just forgot. All right, Tarcisco in Massachusetts asked me, he is a bilingual, dual citizenship, he's multilingual, dual citizenship American. Is this always a benefit or is it not? Now, if anyone knows, again, I say there's no absolute statements. I can probably think of a time where being bilingual and a dual citizen isn't a benefit. But I will say for the vast majority of companies and the vast majority of circumstances, I would make sure I address this. And I would say this. I wouldn't make a bullet about it, but I would open up my professional summary. The first thing I write, I would say, I am a 20-year professional in whatever that is, who is a dual citizen and bilingual or multilingual professional or something like that. I'd make that my first line. Now, what I will not do is, let's see, Tarcisco, actually, I know Tarcisco, I think I believe he's fluent in Portuguese, English, and Italian, because he worked in Brazil, he is Italian, and now he lives in the US. If I'm applying to a Portuguese company, a Brazilian company, then you sure as heck I'm putting multilingual in Portuguese, English, and others. But if I'm applying to a Spanish-speaking company out of Argentina, maybe it's I can't think of one right now, but maybe you're applying to an Argentinian company who speaks Spanish. I am not going to list out, again, less is more. I'm not going to list out Portuguese, Italian, and English. I'm just going to say I'm multilingual. I'm going to let them assume one of those languages is Spanish because I'm hoping they'll call me. And then they can say, hey, what languages do you speak? But by then we're already 3 or 4 interview questions in. Hopefully I've built a rapport. And now that I've built a rapport with them, hopefully they like me. And the fact that I don't speak Spanish is less important because, hey, we got operations in Brazil and Italy as well. So again, less is more for that answer, but make sure that you know who you're applying to and know if it's going to be, what's a better way to frame the information. All right. Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to queue them up here. Next question I got was, this is a long question, so I'm going to paraphrase it, but I have a job interview tomorrow. The company does not have a good reputation. I've known a few people that have worked there. They're no longer with the company. It seems like it's a small dictatorship. I'm torn if I should even do the interview. What do you think? Okay, first of all, just because one person had a bad experience or a couple people had a bad experience with the company doesn't mean you shouldn't interview. You should always interview. It practices your skills. You should manage expectations though too. If they say, why are you interested in working for us? I've said this many times, this response, and I've always made it to the next level. Why are you interested in working here? Truthfully, I'm not sure if I am. I know you guys are really good here, here, and here, but I went on Glassdoor. There seems to be some mixed reviews. You could say something like that. It shows you're being honest, okay? And again, we all want honesty when we're interviewing people, but you need to take that interview because you're going to make impressions with people that you interview with. And guess what? They may not like the company and they may not be there very much longer either. So when you're interviewing someone, you actually might be interviewing with the next company that they end up being at, because then they're going to be there and go, you know what, you really need to look at Tony Martin, because when I interviewed him for our company previous to this one, he was fantastic and he just wasn't a culture fit, but he would be a culture fit here. And he actually self-selected out of the process down there. So first of all, you should interview. Second of all, make sure that the information you're looking at is accurate. Maybe it's 4 years old and the board changed out, and the executive team changed out, and what happened 4 years ago is night and day different than what happened today. Maybe what you're looking at is from the is reviews from the specific remarks from the Houston office, and you're actually applying to the San Antonio office. Two completely different cultures, perhaps, and maybe it's a much different feel. So make sure that what you're looking at is relevant, because if you don't, you might self-select out. And I always believe that in this world, to have an option is much better than to not have an option. So you should really make sure that you're giving yourself the opportunity to turn something down, than just not giving yourself the opportunity to make impressions with people. Because this is all about networking. And what is one of the most difficult things right now in our current culture? It is the ability to network, right? None of us can network as effectively as we used to be able to. What is one way to network? Take an interview. Meet 3 or 4 people who are decision makers in their organization, make a great first impression. And then even if this isn't the right opportunity, hopefully you got a business card, you built a relationship there, and you're able to then follow up in a couple of weeks and go, hey, thanks so much for the opportunity. I hear you guys went in another direction. Please keep me in mind for other things, or if other things in your network are of interest, please reach out to me. I think that's a great way to network organically in this environment. So this question from Eric actually is the next question. Again, if you have a live question, feel free to ask. We're going for about 4 more minutes. But the next question from Eric, how do you evaluate companies to apply to? Very similar to the previous question. I'm going to give a very similar answer, I guess. Here it is. Look, you go to Glassdoor, Glass door.com. You look at those reviews. The less reviews you have, the less weight I'll put in them, because the more reviews, they'll give them a 5-star rating or up to a 5-star rating. You know, so they got a 4.6 out of 5.0 out of 85 reviews. Now, again, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So maybe they only have 3 reviews and they're all former employees who were laid off or fired for cause. So, and you don't know that. You just read these reviews. So make sure you're looking at, again, where the review came from, what part of the region, what department, because there's subcultures or microcultures inside the greater organization. The procurement department in Houston might have a terrible reputation, or the sales department might be a terrible reputation, but operations is loved by everybody. So if you go in there, you're just looking at reviews from the sales and procurement, because that's all that's available, and you're applying to operations, well, don't necessarily disqualify the opportunity before you even apply, simply because a review from a department wasn't ideal. Allow yourself to make your own judgment, but again, regimes change, corporate executives change out, cultures change and shift slowly, but they shift and do change. So make sure you're giving yourself every opportunity. All right, I think we got time for probably 1 more question, and then we'll wrap it up. But again, if you have any questions, I'll make sure I get to them. And as always, feel free to email me separately at amartin626@outlook.com. Again, that's amartin626@outlook.com. Okay, my last question. How do you answer the tell me about yourself question relating to an interview? Okay, so this question is I go over this question pretty frequently, but I think it's important. Okay, your tell me about yourself question is not a time to tell me about every hobby and enjoyment and everything you've ever loved in life and everything you've ever liked. It's not time for you to tell me about your political affiliations or what viewpoints you have if they are polarizing. The tell me about yourself question is designed for you to give me a quick opportunity, to give you a quick opportunity to answer the unanswered questions, the red flags that a common sense person would have if they looked at your resume. So that's when you open with that. Hey, as you look at my resume, you'll see I got 10 years of experience or 30 years of experience. With that, I'm really excited. Or another one is, as you look at my resume, you see I was a CEO recently. I was applying to a VP role. The reason why is because I'm looking to get more involved with people. As a CEO, I wasn't a fan of running the company, and I really wasn't a fan of dealing with the board all the time. I really wanted to manage down versus having to manage up. That's a great answer to tell me about yourself. That's the great opener. But you need to it needs to be succinct. You need to get through it in less than 3 minutes, more than 2 minutes, probably 2 to 3 minutes, and it has to have a point. You need to be thinking about what those points you're rattling off. So you're answering the red flag questions before they're asked, and then you're touching on the requirements of the job and why you're qualified for it. So, you address the red flags, and then you go, and as you look at my resume, you'll see that I have a strong background in SAP. I'm passionate about building relationships with people, and I love sales. You've just answered hopefully a lot of the questions that I'm going to have, and I can't tell you how many times when I've been interviewed for different jobs, I've been told, well, that's great because you just answered my first 4 questions. That was by design. That wasn't an accident. So I can go into more in depth with that too. If you think you're getting ready for an interview and you're struggling or you're kind of clunky on that answer, give me a call, send me an email. Let's set up a free chat. I can help you through that one question. No problem at all. I'd love to. And with that, I think that is everything. So again, I appreciate everyone being on this, watching this. As always, if anything in this you thought was valuable, you want to share it, please share it with your network. Please push this out. It's free information. I want to make sure that everyone who needs these skills are getting these skills, and I can help them in any way. Next, if you're not doing it already, please subscribe to my Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube channel. All the content that I put here, I put on the YouTube channel to the best of my ability. There is LinkedIn specific stuff that doesn't make it over to YouTube, but outside of that, everything that I talk about in a video content is over there on the YouTube channel. Check out howtogetthejob.blog. And lastly, share this with anybody in your network who could benefit from the information, because let me help them and help you get the job. With that, I hope you have a great day. I'll see you next time. Send me your questions this week. If you need some help with your resume, send it my way. Take care.